in Fair Play.
Have a legal issue? Visit TalkingLawTV.com and leave your question. It may be used on the show.
And we're back with Talking Law TV. I'm Michael Shortt, your host, and we're here with Gene Brooks talking about the vaccine decision.
Right. Well, there's actually
it sounds like a John Grisham novel.
There's actually a trilogy of decisions that were recently decided by the U.S. Court of Claims up in Washington, D.C. that focus on the issues of vaccine and autism. It's been in a lot of the national magazines as to whether there's a link between autism and vaccines.
And what did they decide?
Well, they decided that there's not, is the bottom line. And but it took them many years of testimony. They looked at over 800 medical articles, heard from dozens of experts, took testimony lasting for weeks. And they looked at several different issues. One is whether something called thimerosal, which was an additive in the measles vaccine called the MMR, whether that could cause the autism. And autism, we need to talk about that. It's a very broad term. I mean, it's a really, it includes a spectrum of disorders, so it's very broad. But after looking at all of these tests and all the testimony, they decided that at least the thimerosal and the thimerosal with the measles vaccine and the measles vaccine itself, there were three decisions. They looked at three scientific issues. That the petitioners, that's the parties who are bringing the action, could not prove, it's more likely than not, which is their standard of proof, that there was an association between the vaccines and the autism.
So how did that affect all the other cases for other kinds of drugs?
Well, the standards are still the same. There are two types of vaccine cases that can be brought up in the U.S. Court of Claims. And the U.S. Court of Claims in Washington, D.C. was set up probably 20 years ago by the government and the vaccine companies to handle all vaccine issues. So they could standardize them somewhat. And there's obviously some political influence because whoever is president will appoint the judges on the U.S. Court of Claims, and of course they'll serve for a long period of time, even through other administrations. But
now, are they there for life, like Supreme Court judges, or are they like U.S. attorneys, and you get fired when your boss gets fired?
Well, no, they're not administrative judges. They're there for life once they're appointed, and they can resign, of course, but they're there for a long time. Now, that's the U.S. Court of Claims. There's also another tier called the Special Masters, which are sort of judges, and they are more of administrative judges, and their tenure is not as long as those who on the U.S. Court of Claims, actually. But the judges look and consider the decisions of the Special Masters in the vaccine program. The U.S. Court of Claims handles lots of other types of issues, too. But let me get back to where I was talking about. There are two types of vaccine claims. There are those that are on the table that are accepted, and I brought a copy of the table here. It's just one sheet of paper that goes through each vaccine and says what type of adverse events are expected from that type of vaccine and what's the time interval in which that reaction should occur for it to be accepted. If the reaction is on the table, then the Special Masters will accept the claim, and it's a much easier process. If the reaction you're claiming is not on the table, then the petitioner who's bringing the claim has to prove it just like he's proving it in a typical court with all the expert witnesses and so on.
Now, are these the vaccinations given at birth or before you're allowed to start public school?
All vaccines. It includes the vaccines that you're given up till age 2, which can be as many as 20 different vaccinations, and includes those later on. Like some people will get the flu vaccine, for instance. Elderly people may get the flu vaccine, and you and I haven't gotten it, but other people may get it. If I'm going on a trip overseas, I will get vaccinations maybe for tetanus or hepatitis. And if you have certain reactions there that are recognized on the table, then you can bring a claim. You know, for instance, autoimmune diseases can be related to vaccines because that's what the vaccines do. They activate the immune system. and there can be certain autoimmune injuries that are well accepted from vaccines, and some that maybe you can prove.
Can you recover from these, or is this?
Yeah, there's a limit on what you can recover. Let's say a child goes in for DPT, which would include a pertussis shot, and he has a reaction, say, within 3 days. If he has that reaction within 3 days, he becomes a fever, he would be having, and he has an encephalopathy, which is an inflammation of the brain. And that's pretty well accepted. I mean, it's very rare. But if a child has it within 3 days and he has what's called a monophasic event, that means it has a single event which causes injury to the nerves and inflames the brain, then if that child has developmental problems, which actually could be called an autism-type problem because autism is so broad, then you're limited to $250,000 recovery for your general damages. But you can recover also medical expenses, like if they're going to be home care costs for the child and so on, because if they've been terribly damaged in the brain, there may be quite expensive costs, and we call it a life care plan.
Okay, so if you have all your child's medical records, and years later one of these things exposes themselves, how do you that's when you come see an attorney and go, I think?
Well, you should come see an attorney right away, because there are limitations on when you can bring the claim. Let's say your child is 1.5 years old and he goes and gets a MMR, the measles shot, or he gets the pertussis shot. And this is common, actually, that, that I say it's common. For the children that are claiming autism in that disease, there were like 5,000 of them, and the stories were very similar. They'd get 1.5 years old, they'd have another vaccination, and boom, they all of a sudden, a week later, they couldn't talk right, they started acting weird. You have 3 years from the date that you notice the symptoms to file the claim. So if that happens when the child is 1.5 years or 2 years old, by the time you have to file it before they're 5, for instance. So it's based on what the symptoms are. It's not based on whether the doctor would tell you whether it's caused it or not.
And the time constraints are always 3 years from the date of vaccination?
Right, from the date, not from the date of vaccination, from the date that the symptoms occur. For instance, we're looking at cases where the symptoms may have occurred a month after the pertussis shot. Mm-hmm. Now, that's going to be a more difficult case because it's not a tabled case. For a pertussis case, you have to have the encephalopathy within 3 days. If you don't have the encephalopathy within 3 days, then it's a non-tabled case, so you have to go through the full proof.
Now, when you get drugs at the pharmacy, they give you these small booklets on everything. Is this something that parents get when children are vaccinated, so they know to be on the lookout for this?
Well, it depends on the doctor's office. The doctor may or may not give it to them, but it's not. They wouldn't get it, of course, from the pharmacy because all the vaccinations are given in the doctor's office. Hopefully, the doctor's office would say, if you see an allergic reaction or the child has a fever within the next week, call us.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Gene.
Okay.
We're back with Jeff Harris talking about dangerous premises right after this message.